All right.
And you can share the screen at
Okay.
your.
I will. So Gregor said this didn't have to be a modeling talk, so it won't be, but what it will be is an area of research that we've been working on the last few years, where we're thinking about how it might be modeled, and well, more generally thinking about theory in this area. But let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so with my colleague, Julia Torquati, we've been doing some research lately, within the last 5 to 10 years, looking at how spending time outdoors in natural environments versus urban or built environments influences cognitive functioning. And a lot of this work we focused on children, but we've also had some more recent work that we've done in adults. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on this area and some of the research we've done, and then I'm hoping to open it up to more broadly talk about theory in the area. So since, well, for a long time, there's been research looking at the influence of environments on mood, stress, and more recently cognitive functioning. And they generally find that spending time in green, natural environments leads to improvements in mood, lowering of stress, while urban or built environments does the opposite. But also in the last 25 years, there's been an increased focus on the effects of cognition, and in particular, the influence of natural environments on attention. So here's just one example study. This was a study done by Taylor and Kuo, and this was one of the first studies done in children. And in this study, they had kids who'd been diagnosed with ADHD, these are school-age children, and they took them for walks either in a park, a suburban neighborhood, or downtown. And then they had them complete the digit span backwards test. And so walking in the neighborhood or downtown, there were no differences. But following a walk in a park, there's a significant improvement and a strong improvement. So this effect is the same size that you get for stimulant medication. And these kids were not medicated at the time they did the study. But generally, this is about the size of the effect you would find for treatment with medication. We did basically a replication of that study, only in children who did not have ADHD, and we also extended it down. So that was school-age children. We looked at a younger age, 4 to 8-year-olds. And what we found is that we used a spatial working memory task, and this is a task we use a lot in my lab, where they have to remember the location of a target on a large touchscreen monitor for a certain delay, 5 or 10 seconds, and then they touch the screen where they remember the target after the delay. And in general, kids were more accurate after they had done a nature walk, and this was a walk on campus through a lot of the green space on campus. They also kind of did an urban walk through kind of more built areas on campus and downtown Lincoln. And spatial memory is more accurate following the nature walk. They also did continuous performance task. It's a measure of attention. And they had a shorter reaction time following a nature walk. So they more quickly in a continuous performance task. In this case, it was a fish and shark task, where I'll mention more about later, but they had, anytime they saw a fish, they had to hit a button, and then not hit when they saw a shark. And most of the trials were shark trials, so they weren't hitting the button, and then only occasionally they had to hit the button. and they were faster following a nature walk, suggesting they were able to attend to the task better. There's also been research in adults. This is a study by Mark Berman and colleagues where they had in experiment 1, they did either a nature walk or an urban walk, kind of like we did with the kids. In experiment 2, they just stayed in the lab and looked at either scenes of nature or urban scenes. And they found that the natural setting improved the backwards digit span significantly more than they improved after the urban setting. They improved after both, which would be just a simple practice effect, but they improved significantly more after the nature setting. They also did the attention network task, and they found a significant effect of executive attention, which is thought to be top-down controlled attention. And here a smaller number is better. And so they improved after the either nature walk or viewing scenes of nature. I guess they just did this in the experiment 2, sorry. And they did not improve in the urban. So this is just a list of some other effects that have been found. So as I said earlier, they usually improved mood, decreased stress. Some studies find that when you're in a nature environment, you're better able to reflect on a problem, or your brain appears to be in more of a meditative state, which I found with EEG. You see improvements or lowering in HPA axis function, suggesting a reduction in stress. Same thing with parasympathetic nervous system response. And then mobile EEGs, they said, suggest lower frustration, more engagement, lower arousal, higher meditation. So the main theory for the cognitive effects is attention restoration theory. And this is a theory that in my lab with my colleagues were not satisfied with, I guess you could say. This was proposed, I guess, quite a while ago, and I said it's the primary theory in the area of the cognitive effects. So it is based on work by William James on this idea that there are 2 attention systems, a directed or effortful attention, as they call it, and then involuntary or effortless attention. You could also kind of equate this to executive attention for the effortful attention, or top-down control of attention, whereas the effortless attention is bottom up, where the environment or stimuli are controlling attention. And so according to this theory, the directed or effortful attention is susceptible to fatigue, but that also means that it can be restored. So if it gets time to rest, it can be restored and you'll see improvements in it. And according to this theory, some environments with certain types of stimuli are restorative. And they say that natural environments, nature, green space, has a lot of the types of stimuli that make it restorative. So some of the things are, they say it is highly fascinating, meaning it has a kind of a soft fascination. It doesn't have anything that's really trying to strongly grab your attention. It gives you a sense of being away from your kind of everyday life. Are some of the, I guess, things that are proposed to matter in terms of why in some environments are restorative for attention and some aren't. So I'm going to now move on to another study that we've done. This is published already, but this one, we actually measured EEG. And this is with school-age children. Well, I'll show you some data from adolescents also, but we didn't publish those data. But we had behavioral measures of working memory and attention. And then we also had EEG measures, or ERPs, and specifically So we actually took the kids outdoors and in one session conducted the study outdoors in a natural environment. And in the another session, they did the study indoors in a quiet room. And for EEG, we focused on N100 and P300s. And let me just, I don't have a thing. Let me just kind of show you what those are. So here's the time course where the stimulus is presented at 0 milliseconds. And this is kind of the electrical signal. The N100 occurs around 100 milliseconds, and the N means it's a negative peak. The P300 in adults occurs around 300 milliseconds. In children, it's later, and it's a positive peak in the electrical activity. So the N100 is thought to be kind of a measure or a marker of selective attention, while the P300 is thought to be more of a marker of sustained attention and kind of working memory. So it's sensitive in theory to the kind of amount of attentional resources associated with the task demand. So the more demanding the task, the stronger the P300. So we had 10 6 to 11-year-olds and 10 11 to 16-year-olds. And I said there were 2 sessions, one indoors and one outdoors. And you can see the outdoor setting there. It's a lot of large trees, green space, wood chips on the ground where there wasn't grass. And then the indoor lab room, because it was just a quiet room. And I should say the outdoor, it was part of an early childhood center that we have here on campus, but there was nobody else there when we ran the session. So there were no children running around or any other people outdoors there.
You actually recorded EEG while outdoors? You had like a computer?
Yes. Yep, we did. We did, and it was a bit challenging at times. We had to make sure that the temperature was outdoors was okay. It wasn't too hot. We did most of this in the summer. So we had to make sure it wasn't too hot outdoors. We had to also make sure it wasn't too windy. Wind is always a problem here in Nebraska. So we had to really be careful about the weather in order to be successful with the EEG. Oh, and then we also learned the hard way. We also had to make sure we're mindful of when certain insects hatch, because we had one session where can't think of what they're called. They in the mature form, they look like what I would call a ladybug, but they're not actually a ladybug. A Japanese beetle, I think, is what we call them. But a ton of them had just hatched, and they were everywhere. And so we had to finally just cancel the session and send a participant home. But yeah, we even brought those beetles back with us into the lab in our equipment. We couldn't get rid of them. So yeah, but we were able to successfully record EEG, and we did all sorts of analyses to see if, like, for example, if the EEG was noisier outside. And I'm not an expert on those, but we actually found that the EEG signals were not any noisier outside than they were indoors. It actually worked well. Like I said, it was a fairly quiet area. We do have on campus near there a tractor testing track. And so we had to be careful. We had to make sure they weren't testing tractors at the time. But other than that, it actually worked pretty well. So We recorded continuous EEG, but then we went in and pulled out, the ERPs, event-related potentials. And the school-age kids, we used high-density 128 channel electrode nets. For adolescents, we used 256 channel nets. So pretty, high-density nets. The tasks they did 2 working memory tasks. And we did not, well, we collected EEG during the spatial working memory task, but we weren't actually able to analyze EEG for 2 reasons. One is in the spatial working memory task, we just can't get enough trials to pull out ERPs because of the length of the trials are just too long for them to do enough trials, especially children. And then digit span backwards, we didn't record EEG during that time. And then they did an inhibitory control task, a no-go task, and then a sustained attention continuous performance task. And in the go, no-go task, it was the same, basically it's a continuous performance task, but different numbers of trial types. So in the go, no-go task, like in the continuous performance task, whenever they saw a fish appear on the screen, they had as quickly as possible hit a button to catch the fish. If they were too slow, the fish would get away. They, however, every time they saw a shark, they were not supposed to hit the button because the shark would break their net. So in the go, no-go task, 3/4 of the trials were fish or go trials, 1/4 were shark trials. So the idea is that it makes it more difficult for them to inhibit a response on the shark trials because they tend to perseverate and want to hit the button. In the continuous performance task, 3/4 of the trials are shark trials and 1/4 are fish trials. So they get used to not responding, and then they have to respond when they see the fish. So behavioral results, we did find that they were more accurate, or actually less biased, in the spatial working memory task when they were outdoors versus indoors. And there's no significant difference between outdoor and indoors for go, no go or CPT both in terms of accuracy and reaction time. Performance was the same. So for the spatial memory task, as I said, in this task, for those who might not be familiar with it, a target appears somewhere on the screen. So in this case, the target could appear -20. So here's the screen, -20 degrees, and to the left of the midline symmetry axis, which is not marked. It's a completely blank screen. Or the target could appear 40 degrees to the right. In this task, we also, during the delay on certain trials, presented a dot, either on one side or the other side of the target. And we call that a distractor. It did not interact with the environment they were in at all, so I won't show you any of those data, but in general, in this task, children, school-age children and older show memory biases away from the dots. Younger children, preschool children tend to be biased toward. But like I said, the distractors didn't matter for the environment. But what we did see is that indoors, they showed bigger directional errors. And in this case, positive errors mean they're going away from midline, which is what this age of child normally does. They went away from midline. Errors at 5 seconds, were about 2.5 degrees. By 10 seconds, they were up to about 4.5 degrees. Outdoors, however, the memory stayed stable and was biased, but only about 1 degree. Then distance errors. So this is how much they either undershot or overshot the target. So here, negative errors means they undershot or clicked this below the target. And so in this case, the environment interacted with target at -20 degrees. There was no difference. At 40 degrees, however, they were less likely to undershoot, or they were hit actually closer to the target outdoors than indoors. So again, suggesting slightly more stable memory outdoors than indoors. So now I'll move to the ERP results for the N100, also called the N1, and the P300.
Can I ask a question? So this is here you measure the performance while they're outdoors. Is that unique? Are there all the other studies seem to be measuring something in the lab, right? Or is it common that you?
Yeah, most studies measure while they're in the lab. I think there's been a few, at least with adults, that have done like digit span backwards while they're outdoors, perhaps. But yeah, most of them, they expose them to the environment and then take them into the lab. So
I find it not trivial in that you would imagine there would be maybe more potential for distraction in outdoors with potential noise of birds singing and so on, while in the lab much more control. So that didn't occur.
Nope. No. So yeah, so that we don't see that in the spatial memory data at all. Like now it is possible because it's outdoors. There's more possibility that they can be accurate due to having potentially more, let me go back to the photo. There's like trees and things. There's more possibility for them to maybe have like things to anchor their memory. Whereas indoors, we didn't have curtains up, but it was pretty much just blank walls.
Did you say they're, you could also interpret it as they're relying more on the screen frame of reference indoors.
Right.
Right. And outdoors, they may be anchoring to other things, which overall, interestingly, keeps their memory more accurate, but doesn't bias them away from the frame of reference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah.
These are still pretty small distances. So it's within the screen, it's some distance, right? So it's still.
Yeah, it's pretty small. It wasn't a huge screen. Like normally we use in the lab, we like to use a big, large monitor. But we couldn't obviously set up a large monitor outdoors. So because it's a small monitor, we get smaller errors.
But that could be a confounding factor, right?
Well, that's the same monitor indoors and outdoors.
Okay.
Yeah, the setup indoors and outdoors is exactly the same.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so here are the ERP results, and I think it's clearest if you look at this bottom here. So up here, these waves are just CZ, or the electrode at the top kind of center of their head, where here you can see the entire map of electrodes. And for the N100, you see just overall much more negativity indoors, so stronger negativity peak, I guess. Whereas outdoors is just overall less negative, closer to 0. And then for the P300 here, you see more positivity, especially for the no-go trials, which is what you normally find in a go, no-go task, and where you don't see a difference between trial type outdoors. And then this is for the CPT, continuous performance task. And here at the N100, again, for the no-go trials in particular, you see more negativity than for the outdoors than for the no-go trials indoors. I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. More negativity for no-go trials indoors than no-go trials outdoors. And then for the P300, you see in general more positivity indoors than outdoors.
Because of opposite of the other classmates.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is that the opposite pattern than you saw in the go no go task?
Not quite opposite. So the go no go task, we see more negativity for both trial types. Whereas here we just saw it for the no go trials. And then here we see more positivity, but it's more kind of in the back areas. Whereas here it was primarily in the no, and it's for both trials, or here is primarily for the no-go trials, and it was more spread across the scalp.
The pattern is actually even the other way around for the go condition for negative components here, and yeah, in that pathway. So,
For this here,
and to the left side for the N100, you get more negativity in the go conditions.
more negativity here.
No, I marked this here on the right because this might be mislabeled, right? This should be outdoors. The one on the right, right?
This one, this is indoors, the go trials.
And on the right, shouldn't that be outdoors?
This one, oh yeah, sorry, that should be outdoors. I didn't even notice that. Yeah, that should be outdoors.
I'm trying to get rid of that.
Sorry.
Like this.
Yeah, it should be the same as this one. Should say outdoors. Yeah, so there's, in general, in the CPT task, there's more negativity indoors. Or, I'm sorry, there's more negativity outdoors than in the go no go task, or positivity. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I am not. I hate when red is positive and blue is negative. I always want to think of red as negative. But I didn't do the EG analyses, so so here, more positivity indoors than outdoors. Are we good? Okay. And then I'll just show the result we got for the adolescents for, in this case, in factor analysis. These are the electrodes that have grouped together in this factor that I'm showing down here, the waves for, and we're looking again at the P300. We didn't find the same effect in the N100 that we found in the younger kids. Before the P300, indoors, on the go trials, you get more positivity than the no-go for the CPT. So this is more positivity for the rare or uncommon event, which is normally what you see in the P300. And the idea is that it's because they're going to use more resources to form their response to it. But we don't get a difference between go and no-go trials outdoors. So that's not a significant difference.
So the logic, I don't know this so well. So the logic is if you get a larger difference between the conditions, then that reflects more attentional effort to follow the instruction. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. More effort, more attention resources, more working memory resources is the idea.
And the overall result is therefore that in indoors you get larger differences. So there's more attentional effort indoors. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly. So what we proposed is that the smaller peaks outdoors than indoors meant that they were using fewer cognitive resources outdoors, despite the fact that there were no behavioral differences. So if we'd gotten a behavioral difference, that could also have explained it. If they were actually performing better indoors, that could explain it, but we didn't get any differences. So
I wonder if just a thought there. I mean, again, like to go back to the spatial results and tie those in. I wonder if attention is a little bit more selective in indoors. So they're like tuning in more to the frame of reference in the spatial memory task. And there's more of a difference between go and no go in that task. And in outdoors, attention's a little more distributed, right? Where they're less influenced by the spatial frame of reference and less of a difference between go and no go. But what's interesting is that overall, they're able to maybe distribute their attention a little bit more without a cost,
Right.
right? Because they're doing just as well in the tasks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, yeah, I like thinking about it that way. Which is a little, but yeah, why are they able, why can they distribute their attention, but still show,
Right.
you know, the same or better performance?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's, yeah. And the thing is, it's not just when they're actually outdoors. We see similar effects when they've been outdoors and then we bring them indoors.
Yeah.
And again, I find this not trivial, given that the intuition, I guess, of most people would be that outdoors you have more distraction. So if you would maybe think you need more intention to follow task instructions, for instance. So it's certainly
Yeah.
surprising, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been kind of trying to really think about what's going on in the brain, what might be leading to these differences.
I wonder if it's almost like so you've got some selective component, and if that's you're more selective in the indoors, like we were just talking about, there's also then sort of your overall level of attention, almost like an H level, right?
Right.
So outdoors, are you more sort of attentive overall? Almost like, you've got enhanced cognitive resources because you're in a natural environment where you can distribute your attention. So like your selective attention is less focused, but your overall resting level is higher. And of course, you'd have to put these in the context of an actual task to see if those could trade off with each other.
And how, remind me, and how this results when you compare the same thing for the special working memory results? Is it outdoors more like older or younger age group than they're actually in? And could that somehow be linked to a overall resting level?
The age group.
Yeah. So they made like less errors. So is this?
So you're talking about in this study, the age group of this was everybody did both in and outdoor sessions. And the age group was, I think we had 6. Well, let me.
No, I'm thinking about like the results. The group or when they're outdoors, in terms of like the special precision hypothesis.
Yeah.
Do those kids who are outdoors perform more like a little bit older kids, or?
So we had, remember in Esther's work, we had this sort of story that if you pump energy into a baby, its feels, it behaves more like an older baby.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's essentially what's going on is their errors are much smaller, less biased, which is what we see as So the progression we see in the spatial memory is young children, like younger than like 4 years of age, generally show a bias toward. At about 48 months, we start to see this transition to a bias away, but they're really variable with kind of larger biases. And then over time, their biases decrease, and adults show significant biases, but they're smaller. So yeah, smaller biases is like they're more precise.
So this picture of maybe higher resting level or overall maybe more distributed input as would be a possible account for in DFT. And is there there could be an idea that natural environments maybe provide more input like that? Would that be consistent with anything you know? And could we think of natural environments of providing more input?
I don't know. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
It certainly like intuitively fits with the idea of in natural environments, it's more interesting. There's a lot more diversity to the structure in the natural world. People would normally talk about what higher entropy, these types of things.
Yeah. And rather than that being distracting, it could actually boost
interest.
by emphasizing interaction.
Right.
It could actually, so that's very elegant.
Yeah.
It's also like you have like these trees which are very vertical. You have like additional frames of reference which are very stable as well. So
right.
And probably also very familiar some reference frame which is they're used to working with. So
that will be only true for the metric class, but for the no-go, I guess.
Yeah, I think these data you're showing here are really interesting because in the lab, like even with adults, when they're really accurate, they still show that increase in error over delay.
Yeah.
Right. And these guys are like holding steady up to 10 seconds with a 1 degree error, which pretty much says they're just not using that frame of reference, which I think is really interesting, right? We spent a lot of time trying to get rid of that intrinsic reference frame, and here it looks like you got rid of it by taking them outdoors.
Yeah. And I mean, they're still showing a bias away from midline.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's right.
But it's small, and like you said, it's not changing.
Right. Yeah.
Over the play.
Yeah, that's right. It is away from midnight. So yeah.
Could you test some of these if you were to create more stimulation indoors, have more, I don't know, more visual structure, maybe some music or something? Could you emulate outdoors that way?
So haven't done that. We have indoor with adults. We have had them do the spatial memory task while listening to nature sounds versus, they did one session while listening to nature sounds, one session with no sound. And then another group did a session where they listened to nature sounds and a session where they listened to urban sounds, mostly like traffic sounds. And what we found is that the adults or the college students, when they did the session listening to nature sounds, and then did a session where that was just quiet in the lab, they were less biased, but not in the nature sound, but not significantly less biased. But those who, we also then had them complete some measures where we measured both kind of nature experience growing up, like where they grew up, and then we also measured kind of their preference for spending time in nature versus urban environments. And those who preferred natural environments did better, were less biased when listening to nature sounds than no sound. However, we did not replicate that when we compared nature sounds and urban sounds. But our urban sounds, like I said, a lot of it was just traffic sounds, occasional horn honking, but mostly just traffic. And when we listened to it, it sounded very much just like white noise.
And that did not reduce bias, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and that did not read, there were no differences when we compared the urban sounds to the nature sounds. So, but like I said, the urban sounds, other than the occasional horn honking, was very much sounded like white noise. And we didn't tell them what the sounds were either, so they didn't necessarily realize that it was traffic. Although it's pretty easy to tell, like birds singing and so on, that the nature sounds were nature sounds. So,
Maybe it's not just input, it's maybe even a more homeostatic adjustment, and things like mood or openness, or it's a more indirect effect, perhaps not just the input per se.
yeah. Yeah. And we're currently trying to basically replicate the Berman study I mentioned, where they view nature scenes or urban scenes and then have to do our spatial memory task. And I think they're doing a continuous performance task, but this is an adult, so it's a different continuous performance task. But those, I was hoping to have those data today, but we don't have them yet. So, but yeah, so it does seem to be something about the type of input that they're getting from the environment.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we can figure something out. Oh,
It would be nice to maybe see the outdoor stuff with like some kind of like big horizon kind of environment, like a huge meadow where you have almost no structure, whether it's really the outdoors or the enriched
Yeah.
reference frames.
yeah.
You can
see
do a
that.
road trip to the sandhills.
Yeah, there you go. We actually have thought about, we have behind our house, we back up onto a nature preserve, but it's a wetlands. And so it's mostly a big open field, different types of grasses and plants and some water. But yeah, not as many trees, and the trees that are there are further away. So I thought about bringing people to my backyard and and running them.
I also find this ERP result interesting, if in that interpretation that you gave us, in that it's almost maybe a homeostasis kind of phenomenon, that you would say, well, I get no performance differences, perhaps because participants adjust the attention resources. So even though there is some intrinsic difference, which we might still need to understand, then they're compensated for that, right? And that's what they're sort of measuring, which might mean that maybe all the time when we're measuring performance in decision tasks and so on, there is perhaps a process like that going on. That might be a difficulty where we can actually, how to actually even determine, normally to determine the dynamic state, because you're adjusting to be in the right dynamic state. Then we could even more directly manipulate that, and so look at that tuning. I don't know how, when you give speed accuracy trade-off kind of instructions, that's maybe something of that nature.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the discussion. If anyone has any other ideas, please message me, let me know.
Great.
Thanks. Thanks. So I'll make that video then available, send you the link so that others can watch it as well. Great, thank you. So we had two organizational issues which we could briefly discuss. So one thing is we wanted to clearly do next year's DFT school again in presence here in Bochum, and we're going to do a couple of changes to make it more attractive, perhaps. First of all, we now fix the date earlier, which we're trying to do now, so we can publicize it. We will ask make it possible for students to present posters. I think Aaron drew our attention to that, so that they can come. Sometimes funded, because it's not always participation sometimes depends on whether they present something. Also maybe some suggestions here from my group to invite more external speakers, so that, and also not planning ahead, so that maybe it has a more attractive program from the very start, and also brings in more variants. I have a few names. In fact, that's one message to you guys. Anyone interested or willing to speak, maybe let me know. And then, of course, also our new format. I must say, I had a real insight. Remember, we discussed the modules. I've been working on the DFT modules, and I'm now trying that out in my class. And I got interesting feedback from the class. So as I'm trying to make these shorter videos, I'm already made one for them. They're not yet very good, but I'm trying that out. For memory, for instance, I did one, and now for neural foundations of DFT. I recognize that when you make a little video like that, you need to start it somehow, right? You can't just keep going within DFT. You have to say, what is this video about? And so that actually leads me to embed much more that particular topic in general knowledge. And I have to say, memory. What about memory? First say really what I'm talking about, and then I talk about later sustained activation and memory traits, and similar for neural grounding. And I think that can actually really make a difference. Rather than have this embedding in the literature as a separate module, it is contained in every little module. So I'm also thinking of using ideas like that to change the initial part of the course and make it, which would also leave maybe more room for the actual lectures. So necessary prerequisite to get ahead on that, it would be to fix a date, and also seeing if I could coordinate with you guys that at least some of you would be available maybe to teach. We could have some teachers come virtually as well, in general. And then if there's study to add the DFT fest. So for instance, usually we do the school until Saturday, and Saturday morning we have the students present, but we could also shift that to Friday actually, and then could spend Saturday, Sunday as a DFT fest, where some of you who might come could physically be present, and then we could do it hybrid. We have this cool new system here, this system here, which makes it easier to have a real conference call. It's a bit awkwardly looking, but other than that, it's actually quite practical. So then we're looking for a week where the weekend that follows is still usable. Now we have a couple of constraints at our end, because we have there is the EU project that some of us are part of, has its final conference at the end of August, and then we have the retreat of our school institute in September, and also a motor conference that I'm involved in, and a couple of us are involved in September. So currently we're looking at two possible weeks. One is 19th of August until 23rd, and then actually this week has a drawback. Sorry, I made a mistake. No, 12 to 16 in August, with the weekend 17, 18 as a fest, or 2nd of September until 6th of September, and then the weekend 7 and 8 of September as a fest idea. I don't know if August is, in Europe, August tends to be still vacation period, so 12 to 16 sounded a little early for us. So we were more interested in September, but then some of you already teach in September. Anyone has feedback on that? So I can repeat, so 12 to 16 of August versus 2 to 6 of September. So that's the first September week or the third, it's actually the second week of August. A little early, huh? I feel the August is perhaps a bit early.
So September,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, although it's not true for all universities, but a lot of universities here by September 2nd have already started. So if you're wanting to draw students from the US, the August date might be a little better, but
Okay, yeah. And so when does it start? It starts in August, right? Does it?
yeah, a lot of them do. Some of them start in September. Like I think a lot of the California universities start later, but like we start
It would
August
be like the third week of August, perhaps, or the
3rd or 4th. We start August 26th.
okay.
But also, I don't have any students currently who would go. Probably.
Most of our students have been from Europe, just because also the travel costs.
Yeah.
But in the past, when we paid students, then we did have some US and some Canadian
Yeah,
students.
I don't know if it matters that much but for the US, the earlier would probably be better.
Okay, isn't the case similar to us here?
Yeah, we wouldn't start until the end of September. So I was gonna say that first week of September, we're usually doing a family beach holiday. So August might be better for me and Larissa.
Okay.
I think that would actually, we're gonna do our summer vacation probably around Cogsci time. And then the August week you mentioned would be after that time, I think.
Yes. So the Cogsci is actually in end of July.
Right.
So it's 3 weeks away from Cogsci.
Right. So that's probably a little better on my end, but
Yeah, that's good feedback. That was my intuition. Are there any other?
I was gonna ask the group that you are thinking about maybe inviting, the one that uses DFT, they are also from the US. Right?
Paul Tucker, is it right? Or Tupper, is it? He's the former advisor of Jenkins. Tupper.
Yeah.
That was an idea they met at Economics. He's in US or in Canada?
Canada.
But Canada is sort of like the US, I think, in terms of.
Yeah, I think so.
The other group was in the area, so
Was
the other group was in the area.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Okay, so I think then August looks better, right? Were there concerns here in August? Yeah, I mean, I'm more biased because in Portugal and France is on August is sort of sacrosanct. But yeah, so maybe August, 12 to 16 August could do it if we fix it ahead of time. Good. So I'll send that around also to the community, and then maybe I also solicit also suggestions for invited speakers, and maybe also volunteering if any of you would do that. The struggle. We've struggled last time to get enough participants given that we tried in presence. And so we have to work a little bit toward that. I then did not want people to give virtual talks because I thought, then people travel and then the speaker is on Zoom is kind of counterproductive, but we could still, I'm open to any suggestion about that. And then the DFT Fest, that's where I was assuming that we would certainly do it hybrid because it's probably a rough call to travel very far just for a weekend. But then if we have a few people, I mean, certainly most local folks would be here in one place, and then maybe people, it's not very far. So I'll do that. Any other comments about that? Did I forget something? No. Good, and then Coxside, so we definitely wanted to suggest a school. We already talked a little bit in a different, in a tutorial, I think, right? So I think here we just need to maybe again register if anyone wants to join us to let us know. We set up a meeting for people who will contribute to that. Just make that people aware. So anyone who's interested, willing to contribute to a tutorial at Coxside, maybe let me know.
And that was going to be, we were sort of going to take inspiration from the Bratenberg vehicle idea, that book, and pitch it as build an organism in a day.
Yeah, exactly.
So is it going to be a pre-conference or a workshop?
The Coxside tutorials are on like the first day. I think it's before officially the conference starts. So in that sense, it's a pre-conference, but it's part of the conference. And so
They've typically been pretty well attended.
And so it would be an effort to do it differently than we've done in the past, which is something we've already been promoting. Some of us talked about that. We're using Cedar instead of MATLAB coding. So people really not coding, because with DFT, with Cosivina, we often had that students were spending most of the time figuring out the coding. And with Cedar now we're able to bring even people who are not very skilled to build models very early in the course. And so we'll, again, with this shift away from these very long, boring lectures to shorter and more pointed lectures, and then more hands-on, really even early in the lectures, and really having them build models in Cedar. That's been something that has worked already in a couple of instances, and we would emphasize that. That's what John was referring to. But we have to sort out the details. So this is just a thing. So certainly John and I will be active, but we want to maybe ask others to figure prominently. And I'll send it also out to the community. It's only a subset of us are present right here. And any willingness to participate. The date is 24 to 27 of July. So if you're thinking about whether you can join us. Good. So that's the program for today. I'm also happy if anyone wants to volunteer to present something next. We have to come back to some of our other issues, really make that program, inviting other people. And I just went through with Minsia through this procedure of how to publish things in our social media story. And I think everything pretty much is in place now. And I saw that, I think it was Larissa perhaps already did one of those, right? Put up a entry into the web page and then put it into the servers and so on. And we will have to ask people to then also share it. So I was going to send around a variant of what Minsa prepared earlier to remind you of all the steps, and maybe make a little demo again. And I would do that. So like a lay person who waits, from the perspective of someone more like most of us who don't really know all the details so well, take you through that again, so that of all the steps, Peter just showed me today how to do that. So to stimulate that sort of activity.
Great.
So our scheduled time to meet again would be in 2 weeks, so 19th, still before Christmas. And I'll announce the program if our speaker.
Just so you know, Larissa and I won't be able to make that one.
Okay.
We're heading to the States for Christmas, so.
Good. Yeah, remember. Yeah. So I'll let you know. We'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Might be a small meeting.
I have a question about the Coxside thing. Wasn't the original idea to like do one pre-conference, like a tutorial, but also do like a workshop where we do like
Yes.
stuff as well?
Yes. Yeah, and these are things that we would coordinate essentially with Norwich. but we're happy to call it. I don't have that ready right now, but I think that's something that we're going to coordinate, and we will involve, you know, whoever we need to involve.
Yeah, so if people know they're going to Coxeye, and just ping Gregor an email, and that way we can make sure to coordinate and loop together in terms of
Yeah.
plans and stuff.
And if you have ideas of people to invite and don't just tell us. We were thinking about doing another symposium, but we haven't really fine-tuned that. So it doesn't look like we're going to be able to talk about that in this group, but we can set up a separate meeting.
Right.
Can you say more about how do you plan to build the robots or the vehicles? Is this,
So
do you have a
it's-
kit for
it's-
that, or would they be simulated? I'm
Simulated.
So what we're doing now is that we provide CEDAR and link to webbots,
Mhm.
and then that can do a lot of things. And you can actually the things that we did in the tutorial didn't use webbots, right? It was actually only CEDAR. It was only CEDAR, because installing on participants' laptop webbots and integrating, I think we haven't done that yet. I don't think.
Not for tutorial.
Yeah, there will be a new challenge. But what we've done is build large CEDAR architectures and present to these CEDAR architectures the movie spaces, which we provide as a camera input. So it's not, and we even, the motor part we didn't do. We have a CEDAR version of the motor part. We didn't do this the last time, but we could have to. So it's a limited motor interface. But it's doing a brand, for instance, it's doing things like grounding concepts, you know, looking in the scene, like attention selecting the red object that's to the left of something, you know, something as complex as that, but doing that.
Sounds good.
Good, great. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks Ed for your great presentation.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And see some of you.
Thanks.
For those I don't see in the new year, I'll see the others then. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
So the only awkward thing about this setup is that it always looks like we're looking here, right? It's a little, but that's the nature of it, right? There's no way of. If we put this maybe like here, so it's the same kind of effect, right? So, and it's not good for the microphone.
But I think it's better than before.
Better if it's more in this
Yeah.
direction. Yeah,
Looks better.
yeah. Just don't know how well the microphone works.
Yeah, it might not pick up the voice.
People are far. I mean, we're small, but we could get closer.
Yeah, but if we sit here, then we have the same effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's maybe a little bit of a problem.
Any possibility that we get a new beamer in the South Pole?
Because the quality is not good, you think? No? Do you think that the quality got worse, or it's just that you're now spoiled? And
No, it's good for, specifically when you're going CEDAR.
Yeah.
People don't see anything, that see some picture.
and so it's a question of better
Higher resolution.
or having these screens.
No, I think a higher.
So they're higher resolution, okay.
Because the resolution of the beamer is only 720p or something. Maybe
Yeah,
less.
sure.
And even fuller data are like be short times of pictures in 4K would be.
Interesting. I never really thought about it, but yes, okay. That's a good point.
In the picture that the quality is
Yeah, I just noticed a little,
so grainy.
yeah. Yeah, we can surely do that. Yeah. Yeah. This is something everyone uses here all the time. Yeah, you're right. So that's,
They should probably have well, they're already were here when I started, so I'm very old.
and it's even older than that, I think.
Yeah. So even when I started, well, also